Before Easter.
Good Friday.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm a little intimidated. We got two architect rock stars sitting to my right, so I've got to keep myself in my P's and Q's here.
Give the show a like and a share anywhere you're watching, on any social media platform you're watching, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, TikTok, Snapchat, iloveseville.com. We literally are live on every social media platform possible, and the content is archived in perpetuity. In my business, we call that evergreen content. Judah Wickower is our director. Welcome to the program. Steve Callahan. Steve, I love when you watch the program. He's watching outside Nashville, a University of Virginia graduate outside Nashville. Welcome to the show, Steve. Hello, Hendersonville. That must be family of mine in North Carolina. Hello, Hendersonville. Andre Xavier, Yona Smith, Melissa Bickley, Maureen Holler-McKenya. Welcome to the broadcast. Theo Blake. Candace Vanderlyn, hello.
Candace.
Hello. Charlottesville Regional Chamber of Commerce, hello. Ooh. Welcome to the show. Donna Beham, hello. You got 2 Board of Supervisors watching the program and 1 City Councilor. Hello, guys. We appreciate your service. J-Dubs, my friend, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Beth Hyder, hello.
Ooh, we like Beth. Thank you for the sweets, Beth.
The Hillsdale Conference Center. Is that where you're watching today, Beth? Let us know in the feed. Today's show is going to be absolutely fantastic. If you want to give Bob some props, just put it in the comment section. Or if you have questions and want to contribute some perspective, put it in the comment section. The only dynamic and interactive show on the market today. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll. Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate life and the pursuit of happiness. We're presented by the Yes Team Realtors and Yes Realty Partners. We are live in Charlottesville, across Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love Seville network. Today's program, an hour of housing chitter-chatter. We have 2 architects that are going to make this show a hell of a lot smarter. Judah Wickower is our director. Now, Judah Wickower, we appreciate you. I'm going to ask you to do one thing on the fly, and it's grab this iPad in front of you and stream the show on the television so the fellows can see them on the big screen. Keith Smith, the star of our program. Keith, good Friday morning, my friend.
Good Friday to you, my friend. Yeah, this has been an exciting show. I've been waiting for this all week and kind of been working on it. We want to talk a little bit about the invisible walls of zoning and how does that affect affordable housing. And we're going to kind of do a series of that. And we're starting off with a couple of rock stars that are probably the top 2 architects. They paid me to say that, actually. The top 2 architects in town. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about from their perspective and from a practitioners. No, practitioners. That was the word I was trying to get out. I was struggling on my P's today. From their perspective, what does this look like? What is their challenges? What held up the process? And more importantly, I can't wait to ask Richard this question, so I'm giving a little bit of a heads up here, is we've been talking about turning red tape into green tape for months and months and months on this show. What red tape could be kind of torn out a little bit to make affordable housing or this missing middle or these ADUs or anything like that more affordable so we can deliver them to the folks that need them. So that's kind of today's show. But we want to see what kind of questions the feed has. That's always exciting when the feed pops in some questions.
Justine Montgomery, welcome to the show. Is she watching from?
Vermont.
From Vermont, Justine. We love when you watch the show. Susan Steinmart, already giving some props to this gentleman, Bob. She says, Bob gets affordable housing. The Thomas Jefferson Community Land Trust submitted his firm's work to the Virginia Home Builders Community Award competition. So why don't we start with Bob? Bob Pinino.
Yes.
Good?
Pinio. Yep.
Pinio.
Yeah. Yep.
Welcome to the show. You are well liked in the community. I can already tell by the feed. If you'd like to give Bob some props, put it in the comment section before we talk shop.
Yes.
How about an introduction to you, Bob?
Great. Thank you. My name is Bob Pinio, local architect. I own a design development, which is an architecture firm. We have 2 offices, one here in Charlottesville and one in Baltimore. I have known from my stories, one of the stories that somebody told me one time, there's 2 types of architects, they said. One is one who does one thing everywhere, like you do apartment buildings or you do commercial. We're the opposite. We do everything in one place. So we do everything. We love our clients. Our whole practice is based on one big principle is to take care of the people, take care of our clients, understand their needs, understand their desires, and be a conduit for their vision. So we have a great time doing that. And the other one is we're based in a 3-dimensional world. So our practice is known, this is a long story, but I dealt with, dealing with a couple. We were designing their house together for them. And one of them turned to me and looked at the door symbol and said, "What does this mean?" And I thought to myself, this is a problem of the way I'm practicing. I should be doing some things 3-dimensionally so my clients understand implicitly the things that that we're designing, and so that they can have a big, huge part in their own vision. So that's the primary part of our practice.
Very cool. This is going to be a fantastic show. This gentleman over here, Judah Woodcarroll, if we can get him on camera, Richard Price, I've known for a couple of years, not only an architect, but a hell of a squash player. This guy is a beast on the squash court. I will straight up say that. His length is something to deal with. Richard, the show is yours, my friend. How about an introduction to you?
Great. Well, I'm Richard Price. I'm an architect as well. And most of my work, though, is kind of the opposite of Bob's. I'm a planner, primarily doing planning work around the country, and also have a degree in real estate development, which for me has been both informed my planning work when I'm doing that, but also I've done some development work here, largely in response to my interest in planning issues, which I think we're going to talk about my High Street project today, so I'll talk a little bit about how my interest in infill and missing middle housing has led to the development of that project. So.
And that's just a great place to kick off, right? And there's this misunderstanding of the missing middle, right? Mm-hmm. Certain people think it's one thing and certain people think it's another thing. So from your perspective, you're a planner, you work around the country, and an architect. Define missing middle to what your definition of missing middle is.
Well, I think most of the development industry these days is sort of fragmented into 2 scales. One is the single-family detached housing, which is what we see built in suburbs around the country all over the place. And then larger projects. You're seeing, for example, here in Charlottesville, we're seeing West Main being redeveloped with some very large apartment buildings.
Apartment towers.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Apartment towers.
Apartment towers.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people would say overscaled, but yeah.
You defined that as scale?
You're seeing that, sorry?
Did you define that as scale?
Out of scale, did I define out of scale?
Like the flats, is that out of scale?
Well, I think a lot of that's a reaction to what was there before. You sort of went from 1 and 2 story to 6, 8 stories and sort of missed the middle in between the two there. So missing middle is really the pieces that are in between the 2 extremes, the big scale development and the single family. I think that's actually a fairly recent development that we've been missing that scale, because there are a number of, even here in Charlottesville, a number of older examples of missing middle housing that were developed before World War II, and somehow we've lost that piece of the development market. And I think there's been a response to say, we really need to get that scale of development back again.
So for those who are watching on Facebook and those who are listening on podcast or whatever, they're not going to see this exhibit that our director's going to put up. But there's a pretty simple graphic that I've found on it where it physically shows, the physical portion of it. Mm-hmm. But part of the question is that we're talking about a physical component of it, right?
Right.
Multiple stories versus single stories, and then the missing middle, what's in the middle of it. But it also has a economic term to it. So let's talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what does the missing middle mean as far as an economics? And then we want to switch to how can we solve that problem?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's really the heart of the issue. I guess I would argue, just to go back to my origin as a planner, that good urbanism, good cities are really about diversity. They're a diversity of scale, a diversity of building types, diversity of people. And the development industry, certainly since the Second World War, has, I think, adapted the Levittown model, which is to build lots.
I'm just smiling.
Lots of the same
because I grew up in
thing.
Levittown.
Did you grow up in Levittown?
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn until I was
moved
a
to
teenager, then moved out to Levittown.
But the economic idea behind that was to build lots of the same thing over and over, repetition. And I think that the missing middle is kind of design intensive in the sense that it needs, every small project has got a unique site, some unique conditions. Unique parameters. There's lots of different solutions to that, townhouses, courtyard housing, small apartment buildings. But each of those is kind of design intensive, and they don't really lend themselves to the big scale mass development that you see typically in suburbs around cities these days. So.
Bob, jump in here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I've been thinking about this since you invited me, Keith. Part of the whole idea of the missing middle, and we've started a design umbrella company or another company called Design Savvy, and part of what we're looking at are ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and that's part of that missing middle too. It has a lot to do with, and it has a lot to do with scale. It has a lot to do with opportunity. And it has a lot to do with changing the fabric, but there's so much latent, through our studies anyway, we found that there's so much latent opportunity. In Charlottesville, the lots are large, and I've come from different places. I've lived in different places like Portland, Oregon, and in Boston. And the density, the types of different houses, the types of different people that you run into, the mix of commercial and residential is so fascinating and so powerful that it's really something that we don't have to be scared of, something that I think we can embrace. So that's why we're so passionate about the missing middle.
So as Bob knows, I'm part of a national cohort out of Portland State University, and we're working on trying to bring ADUs across the country in a more unified design for it. And we're just going to dive right into this. So the three major struggles that we found on ADUs, one is the cost. So ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units.
Over 100K. How's that going to make sense for someone who spent over 100K? I'm just talking out loud. I'll be the devil's advocate here on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, if an ADU is going to run over 100K to put in a backyard, by the time someone gets cash flow positive on an over 100K ADU, we're talking a decade plus down the road. Yep. On top of that, we have tremendous red tape in this municipality for ADUs in backyards.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If I'm a developer, we represent one with our firm. We're an advertising agency here. Why wouldn't we just go buy right when 50% plus of this 10.2 square mile city is R1 single family detached? The easiest way to profitability is an R1 single family detached at $500,000, $600,000 plus at sales price. There's the devil's advocate opposition to what we're talking about. Is that safe?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, you're right on target with that.
That's the easy path.
Yeah. Easy path to profitability.
Yes.
So your $100,000
Yeah.
is about $100,000 light.
Right. So who's going to do that in Charlottesville?
It's extremely expensive to build an ADU. So part of this national thing, cohort I'm part of, which involves almost every one of the states, everybody's looking at everything from containers, shipping containers to prefabs, and they just can't drive the price down. So how they actually did it in Portland and Seattle is by us, unfortunately, the jurisdictions offered substantial tax incentives.
Yeah, tax incentives, right.
Tax incentives. And those taxes, so that's the second part of that, is the tax incentives have to help out so you can provide a place for a family to live that makes 40, 50, 60% of area median income. And that's what they do. It's a substantial tax break over a substantial period of time. And it's amazing how it turned over there. And the third thing is, as you aptly said, the red tape.
Yeah.
Right? So part of the problem, and Bob, you intimately know about this, part of the problem with the ADU ordinance in Charlottesville, it all has to be owner occupied. All these other jurisdictions.
And a special use permit, a special use permit, exactly.
Excuse me, sir?
And a special use permit.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So,
Bob's got something to say on that. I can tell right now.
Yeah, so about...
we have one rule.
Yes.
Don't talk about the Red Sox.
Okay. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I was so passionate about ADUs. I thought they were a great, not only a great architecture problem, but a great urban way of solving urban issues. So we went to the city at the time, and there was a housing czar. And I said, "You've got this great ordinance. It's a phenomenal ordinance." And it was passed by Maurice Cox, who was architecture professor, but also the mayor, as probably everybody knows in Charlottesville. And the problem with it is you read it, and there's a couple different pages. By the time you're done reading it, you're very confused about the language. The language is so kind of, it's just very complicated. So we said, why don't you hire us to do a book, and basically this would be a starter book for anybody who wants to do an ADU. And it's available. If you look up ADU Charlottesville, it's the first thing that comes up.
Yeah.
And it's a guidebook that tells everybody, not just designers, builders, homeowners, anybody who wants to understand about it, what are the rules. And we took every bit of line item that was in the ordinance, which is very confusing, and we broke it down. And we gave them a workbook that allowed them to kind of understand what their opportunities were. And just a couple things on, not in contrary to what you're saying,
Sure.
but there's a couple benefits that ADUs do offer.
Sure.
One of them is the land is for free. So on the ledger, you basically, there's a single family house, you have a piece of land that you don't have to pay for that you have the rights to add to. Number two, the infrastructure. The infrastructure from a community base, to do a big 300-unit apartment building, you're going to need new sewer. That it's taxing, so that's part of the benefit of the ADU is that.
I'll play devil's advocate with you again.
Yep.
The beautiful thing about an ADU down the road is it's going to create a more eclectic, diverse, and open-minded community because it's creating a price point that's more attainable and affordable for people to have. However, in the short term, it could actually expedite gentrification because the money needed to build the ADU in the backyard, it's going to require somebody with some deep pockets to build. So in the short term, I think gentrification could actually be expedited by the rollout of ADUs because the folks that can afford it are going to be affluent.
Well, actually, I think that points to a real kind of a global idea about the challenge with ADUs is that for most homeowners, it's a little tiny development project. You have to go out and get it designed and get it entitled. You have to get it financed, and then you have to build it on what's generally a very constricted site, difficult. So it's a tough little project.
Yeah.
Not the kind of thing that I think most homeowners, even if they want to do it, really feel like they can take on. And I've looked at a number of these things now, and it's a lot of challenges to do this. I just saw an article recently about California has passed some statewide zoning reforms that have basically encouraged ADU construction. And what you're seeing now in Los Angeles is the rise of firms that are sort of specialized in doing
ADUs.
this. And I think the idea would be that a homeowner can call up one of these firms and say, hey, I want something in my backyard, and an ADU development company can come in and take care of the whole package, the design, the entitlement, the financing, construction, the whole works. And the homeowner doesn't really have to, quickly learn how to become a developer.
They're doing this on the whole West Coast.
On the whole West Coast,
So
yes.
Oregon and
Yep.
Washington. So I was part of the Oregon team
So, yeah.
that put this together. And the lovely acronym they use is
RIP.
RIP.
Residential Infield Project.
And they needed
Needed
go,
someone like
perfect,
me
yeah.
to brand that differently.
I literally,
Yeah, that's
literally introduced Jerry to the folks out there, and
Super.
out there, they're just proud of it. It's just
Yeah.
that they're
Sure.
proud of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
terminology.
Rest
But
in
that's
peace.
literally what's happened. These
Yeah.
firms that come in there. I'll tell you another statistic that is kind of contradictory to Jerry's comment. They have found, because of what you said, how
Increases
complicated.
resale value.
No, the people ended up going into foreclosure because what happened is they didn't know, exactly as Richard said, they didn't understand the game. They got involved in it. This is what prompted some of the jurisdictions to drop the owner-occupied component and then provide the things. Because what happened is they would build it, they would get this loan to do it, rent it out typically to a friend or relatives. They didn't pay them. All of a sudden, they went from having no loan to having a substantial loan,
Yeah,
and the foreclosure rate went through the roof on these particular type of folks. So that was like some real world happened out west. So I'm actually helping a couple of land trusts out west to do this, and what the land trust is doing, gentlemen, is they're coming in and leasing the ground underneath the ADU.
Yeah.
Right? They take on the development, they take on the building, they take on the risk of the management, and they feed back rental income to the property. So what that does is that stopped the gentrification, so that it's part of the affordable housing rental income went to support the family that lived there for quite some time.
Yeah.
The problem that this can't work here is because, let's say I chair the land trust, we can't do it because it has to be owned by the property owner.
Right.
So that's, to me, if the city would change that one criteria,
Which I think
Yeah,
they're
big hope, yeah.
yeah, I think they're in the process. That's
they've
definitely
been in the
on-
process
yeah.
for 3 years on that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and the other, I guess, if we're talking about the specifics about the zoning ordinance, I think the other thing that stymied me is the formula for calculating how big an ADU can be in Charlottesville, which is
40.
based on a percentage of the building footprint, which
Yes.
with a lot of our housing stock is older and has smaller building footprints on big lots, so that makes it hard to come up with an ADU that's of sufficient size to really make a viable
So the
apartment.
ADU can be 40% of the
Footprint.
building footprint of the actual home that's on the piece of property?
Yes,
Yeah.
no more. But that's the building footprint, but then you can do multiple levels, depending on the height of the main house.
And they've upped that out west, big time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Of multiple levels of an ADU, so multiple levels that can be rented, or an ADU that offers a second floor to a tenant?
So let's say that there's a 1,000 square foot main house.
Uh-huh.
You have a 400 foot footprint of the ADU can be 400 square feet footprint. And then there's another restriction that tells you how tall it can be. And that's also relative to the
Main house.
main house. So if the main house is tall, the ADU can be tall.
Because you don't want the ADU towering over the main house, then it would be an eyesore
Right.
potentially in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and maybe, Keith, you may
Interesting.
just want to describe what an ADU is, just in case.
Yeah,
people
sure.
Yeah.
That's a
understand it, 'cause I'll tell you one thing, that whenever I talk to people and we're going out and canvassing, the first thing is, do you know that you can have another house on the back of your single-family lot?
And
they
no
look
one
at
knows,
you, and
right?
it takes, what? It's like, so
So
just
Bob,
the definition.
I've been doing it for quite some time. You tackle that. Explain an ADU.
Okay, so an ADU is an
Please.
accessory dwelling unit. So on a R1 or R1S, which is the single-family zoning for the city, you have a single-family house, and that's what everybody understands. Maurice Cox and the planning board at the time passed this ordinance that allows for an accessory structure, an accessory dwelling structure, to be built on that single-family lot. The whole idea is supposed to be an accessory, so therefore the scale and the tenor of it shouldn't distract from the look and feel of the main house.
But you also can do it internal.
You can also do it internally.
So I gave our director Judah a diagram that I'm sure he'll put up as we're having this conversation.
Yes.
But it's not just limited to, I think the colloquial, the common terminology is granny flat, right?
Right.
Right. But you can actually do it internal. You can do an addition to it.
Yep.
You can add a wing off of your current home.
Yep.
To go ahead and do that. And I'll just do a little bit of a real world example. My daughter and my son-in-law live in the Green Lake district of Seattle, right? So that's Belmont. If you just imagine Belmont, that's what Green Lake is, just a little bit bigger. So a nonprofit went in and bought a 3,000 square foot house, cut it up into a 2-bedroom apartment on the lower level, 2-bedroom apartment on the upper level, and built an ADU in the back. So that one lot that has 3,000 square foot single family detached lot now has 3 families or 3 couples living on it, and they had to meet certain. My daughter's a teacher.
Sure.
They had to meet a certain income thing, and it's working out perfect.
Yeah.
Throw this to you guys, though, and I'm tremendously supportive of ADUs. The only
Right.
reason I'm offering this perspective is to be the other voice on a talk show here.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
the sole reason, okay?
Yep.
You mentioned the Belmont neighborhood, and you taught me something right now about the 40% requirement with the footprint of the actual home. Many of the homes in Belmont are cottages. So we're looking at homes in Belmont that are like 700 to 1,400 square feet. So we're looking at an ADU that's like under 400 square feet in the backyard.
You just hit the primary problem.
That's a tiny home.
Yeah, it's
That is
tiny.
a difficult place to rent. And
Yeah.
I'm not doing this because I don't like ADUs. I love ADUs. It's just for the sake of a talk show here.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly the heart of the issue. That I think it's a well-intentioned metric. You don't want the ADU to overwhelm the primary residence. I just think that needs to be tweaked a bit so it works a little better with our existing housing stock.
You could put a 2-car or 3-car garage on that same lot and have zero restriction to it. You could go.
Exactly.
You could put a garage on
Right.
that lot that's bigger than the house,
Yeah.
and nobody. You just get a permit and go.
Yeah.
So there's some, like I said, there's a couple of things, and it's a little frustrating from a practitioner's perspective, and that it's been taking so long. But this is, we talk about all the time on the show, how can we help inventory? How can we help get folks into homes? This is a very simple, quick solution to it. You do it in scale, but when I say, hey, oh, by the way, I can build a 1,200 square foot garage
Right.
on a house that has 12, that's just
Yeah.
nutty.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully this discussion will loosen this
Yeah.
up a little bit, but
And-
I know Bob is doing it, and I know I have been doing it. We've been talking to elected officials constantly. Go ahead,
So
Bob.
I hope I know because Richard's probably want to make sure that we talk about Richard's project because the inherent thing about all of this, and Keith, you set this up beautifully, what does zoning have to do with it?
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about this. Zoning is a collective understanding of what a community wants, and it's a reflection of what they want, and it evolves over time. But what I think Richard is doing, what I think the new comprehensive plan is doing, what I think ADUs are doing, is part of the evolution of who we think we want to be.
Sure.
Because there's a point where you're like, well, we're not getting what we want, so how do we get what we want? And then you start looking at what are the things that are keeping you back. ADUs were a down payment on a different type of housing product.
What does that mean?
Well, so for instance, single family, it was just single family, and you either there was a little latitude in regards to what you could do with it. They had restrictions on how many people, non-related people could be. So the ADU law allowed something fundamental, which is another family, another detached or attached unit. That meant 2 families. But then to Richard's point, they got to a point where they're like, look, we don't want this to go too fast. So they made restrictions. The size of it, there can only be 2 people in it at most, so that's a huge restriction. What happens if you're married and you have a kid, for example? Well, I guess you got to move. So there are these things that, but collectively, what we're doing and what zoning is doing, and in the change of zoning, is we're talking about who we want to be. And
So
I think that's
I need to play off of that,
Yeah.
and I need to play. I'll give to you, Richard, in a moment. Play off something that we've been talking about repetitively, and you in particular, that this seems to be going on for a long time. I dug into a bunch of articles, God love Google. This whole conversation we're having right now was happening in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. I read one in the 60s where the city council and certain individuals were talking at the time that if we don't do something about all this single-family detached residency in the future, housing is going to be unaffordable.
But
guess what?
But the problem is city council doesn't have the autonomy. Until we get a massive rewrite of zoning here, over half of a 10.2 square mile city is dedicated to McMansions, single family detached. We have to rewrite the zoning and allow more density.
I don't disagree with that, but they have tools. Bob's outlined it. They have tools for them now to do this. And I'm gonna pivot this to Richard, because Richard, your project on
High Street,
1130.
And Roger Voisinay has just shared this show to like 30 different Facebook pages.
So you better talk about it. Roger will get mad.
Talk about your High Street project.
Roger's going to call me up and say, but wouldn't that be an example of what we're talking about, your project there? And then I really talk about, if you don't mind, at the back end of it is what could have been done different to maybe keep the pricing at a different price point than it is now. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. Great questions.
Let us know where it is, the project.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an East High Street, 1130 East High, so it's about halfway between downtown and Freebridge.
Real close to La Michoacana.
Right, yeah, right next to
yeah.
Yeah, I'm a habitué now. Let me kind of throw out a thank you to them for all the great meals over the years. Yeah. The project was really just started with me for years wanting to do an infill project like this, and not just from a design perspective, but try to figure out the challenges from a development perspective. What would make these things work, and what would the challenges be?
So, Richard, I'm going to stop you for 1 second.
Yep.
Much like what Bob just did with me with the ADUs, lots of folks who watch this are not in the sphere that we're in. So, quickly explain what an infill project is, if you don't mind, please.
Right. Well, and I think we've thrown out the terms ADU, missing middle, infill. It's all related. Infill is basically doing new development inside existing urban areas, urbanized areas. ADUs is one example of an infill development. It's on a single-family scale. Missing middle housing that I'm doing, the land when we bought it had two decrepit single-family houses on it that were not salvageable, and we tore those down and replaced them with 12 condominium units, which some of the condominium units have multiple units in them. So there's actually 2 office spaces and I think 12 residences in that project facing onto a courtyard. It's courtyard housing is the idea. And that was actually by right. So I was delighted.
By right.
Wow. It was by right, yeah. Well, say by right, but it still was a year and a half to get entitlements, which is part of the problem. Yeah.
So again, year and a half.
Year and a half, yeah.
Can I ask? This might be an unfair question. Can I ask the cost of a year and a half?
That's where I was going to go.
A lot, yeah.
It was a.
I haven't done the full math yet. We're just
you
finishing
probably
up,
don't want to.
Are we talking 6 figures?
For the soft costs. Probably the total soft costs of the project were definitely into 6 figures.
And that includes his time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and the other thing that it misses, that's a year. Oh, sorry, that's a year of. If he could have done another, he could have done another one. He could have done another one in that time.
Oh yeah. So the real challenge for me was how do you break this down into too small for the big guys, too big for the small guys, right? I'm talking about the development community here. How do you break this down in a way that makes it work? And the solution I came up with was to divide it up into 8 separate buildings. So there were builder-scaled buildings that you could do with home building financing. So we built it in phases in 8 different, and that was a lot of. It's a 6-year project at this point. A lot of that was building it in phases. If it had been built at once, it would have been quite a bit quicker. But So I discovered that the financing wasn't really set up. I had to work back and forth with the bank to figure out a way to make the financing work with this. The entitlements took a lot longer than I had planned on. The sales went very quickly once they were built. Once people saw the units,
Sure.
They were very enthusiastic about it, and we sold out very quickly. But it was a little sort of hard to sell anything in advance like you might with an apartment project. It wasn't really apartments, so it's hard for people to visualize.
All of us are in this field, right?
Yeah.
So just for those who are not, by right means that, by zoning, you can build it literally what the word means, by right. You don't have to go to ask.
The easiest path to execution.
Absolutely. It says you open up the book and it says you can do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Entitlements is a word that probably most folks who are listeners may not be used to hearing before. So in my vernacular, entitlements are the site plan approvals, engineering, erosion and control, all these things, all these documents that you have to get in order to build. Is that a fair example of entitlements?
Yeah.
And then once you have your entitlements, then you can actually start.
You're entitled to build.
You're entitled to build. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Bob.
That's good explanation, though. That's good explanation.
Yeah, perfect example.
Thank you, Bob.
So it was a more complicated process than I'd anticipated.
It always is, though.
Yeah, it always is. Yes.
All right, how about this question for Richard? Would you do that project again, knowing what you know now?
Just like it is now, probably not. Certainly make some changes. I learned some things, which was the idea. I actually started out thinking it would be more of a cottage community, which is another something another kind of missing middle housing we might want to talk about. But it's basically a very small, single-family detached development focused, facing into a courtyard. Usually happens a lot in an infill. But the market, in talking to the market, people know the market here in town. It seemed there was a bigger market for people looking for one-floor living, for example. So that we changed it to single floor flats as opposed to a single-family detached housing.
So on the cottage front,
Yeah.
there's a great project out west where they're doing tiny homes for vets,
Yep.
Homeless vets. And actually, Stacy Pepia and I were with the Albemarle County former city. We've been looking at that project, working with Anthony Harrow, trying to help to come up with an opportunity for homeless vets
Wow.
in that. So
That'd be great.
Yeah.
We might need a decent architect.
Yeah.
You know any?
Yeah.
I know two. No, I know a lot. One thing that I keep thinking about is the backdrop is who are we and who do we want to be as a community?
Yep.
And there's a lot of pressure. And, I was in preparation for this reading, and there's this unsolvable, and this is the cancer, and, there's all sorts of things. The missing middle is, if nothing else, a fun way to think about the problem. Because if you're a single family, if you don't want change because you're invested and you're in, everybody else is out, it's an
You're talking NIMBYs.
Talking NIMBYs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy way because you can say, look, I don't like development because look at what development is. It's huge, it's big, it adds all these things. It's not beautiful. That's because the scale is so big, and in some ways it's hard to appropriate it. It's hard to understand it. So don't do anything or do something big. The beautiful part about what you're talking about is that these projects, they are design centric. And as architects, of course, that's what we want. But as people, as community, you think about if you put pictures in front of people and say, what kind of community do you want to live in? They'll always pick the design centric ones, the ones that are scaled. These are all design problems. I lived in Portland, Oregon. And I moved there right after undergrad. And the beauty of it was that city received me. There was a place for me. I was a transient. I was only there for a little bit. But the Charlottesville accept other people. And I think right now we're in this idea that that we're going to lose, and because development is a sum game. Like you're going to lose, you're in, you're all right. Nobody else can come in, because if they come in,
Well, that's the
there's
whole
gonna be-
purpose of this wall, invisible wall concept
Yeah.
that I
Right.
came up with for today.
Right.
And what that invisible wall does is that invisible wall does a term that Jerry and I do not care for, which is you drive till you qualify. It just pushes
Yeah.
everybody out. This
Yeah,
wall moves out, and this wall moves out,
Yeah.
this wall moves out,
Yeah.
and it makes traffic worse. And it's just, instead of trying to use the tools that are before us at the moment, and while we're tackling the bigger questions, this is the reason why we're so hot on these missing middle and these
Right.
ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, so we can at least help solve the problem immediately while the bigger questions are being
Right.
tackled.
Sure.
What Jerry uses this all the time. Don't let the
Don't
good.
let-
Don't let perfection be the enemy of
Yeah, the good-
productivity.
There you go.
Yeah, something
the
along
good.
those lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the
And that, and we're not going to go down the road of politics.
No.
But I think from I'm an entrepreneur, businessman, you guys are too. Successful entrepreneurs and business people throw something against the wall, they see if it sticks, and if it sticks, they go down that road. Right?
Yeah.
That's what Roger did, right?
Richard.
Richard.
Yeah, Richard.
Started
Although
with
Roger is giving some important things on the feed. You want to hear this?
Sure, yeah.
Roger
See?
Voisinay. The city lost $50,000 per year in real estate tax revenue from all the condos that were delayed. The creation of a condominium association cost Richard $50K or more.
Absolutely, yeah. Roger, thank you. Roger's has been our marketing guru on this project, so we have to throw out a thanks to him for
He's done a hell of a job with that.
a lot of the success.
So,
has
Richard,
come
I
from Roger.
apologize. Roger was texting me. That's what.
Yes.
That's been Roger.
As he did
Neil
that.
Williamson has
Well-
something
Oh,
for
there
you
you go.
guys. Free Enterprise Forum.
Love Neil.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Neil is, I love Neil as well. He quotes Supervisor Liz Palmer. Quote, Supervisor Liz Palmer said she was very concerned about the proposed ability to put ADUs in any residential zoning district. She said that seems like a blanket statement that could create an awful lot of havoc and quality of life issues for the people who are already here.
Right.
Liz Palmer.
This is fundamental to
Yeah.
this. It's
Yeah,
who
this is
are
it.
we and
Yeah.
who do we want to be? These are all tools. The zoning is a tool. Politics are tools. We have to come to a consensus, not that we're going to, but at least an honest discussion about who we want to be.
What kind
You're
of
basically
city?
saying, do you want this community to be
Receptive?
a bastion for rich
Right.
or diverse and eclectic?
Well, this is just the conversation, and all these things are tools in that. But I think fundamentally, if there's fear, then I would suggest go to Richard's, go to Richard's site, go to other cities, and find out if it feels okay. Because what Richard proved with his infill project is that, density doesn't look bad. It actually feels great.
Looks great.
And-
D word, man. Oh yeah, the D word.
And,
Okay,
and
yeah.
what we're actually talking about is capacity. There's so much more capacity than we allow ourselves to understand. And Richard, he went from 2 decrepit houses to this beautiful site and asked the people that live there, what do you think about living here? What do you think about living in Richmond? In Charlottesville. What's the rich part about being here? I think they'd say, I had an opportunity. I was receptive. And one more thing I have to say is we go in front of architecture boards, BAR, and I love those boards because they have a really important job to do. They're the qualifiers of what the standard is. So it's tough for architects and it's tough for owners to understand it, but they actually add a huge service, which is to bring up the scale and the understanding and you're in a specific place. Make sure you design for it. That is a very important piece. So anyway, that's my little diatribe.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the entitlement question
Sure.
and its impact on affordable housing. So I chair the Land Trust, Community Land Trust, and we just finished a project last year on Nassau Street, right? The entitlement process going through the city, we sold the units for $215,000, cost the Land Trust almost $20,000 a unit more than it should have, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we could have substantially sold those units
Below 2.
below 2, but it was the entitlement process of it. Oh, by the way, now you need to add a fire hydrant that they
The
missed.
red tape.
That they missed that cost us $41,000
Right.
because somebody missed it or it was whatever it was
Yeah.
on that end of it. So this entitlement process or this red tape process, and again, I'm constantly speaking about Portland and Seattle and the West Coast, but well, let's say
Yeah.
the left coast is kind of a little bit more liberal than this side. They're dropping all these processes.
Yeah, well, let me throw out a great example about that, because, for example, if I'm building a single-family house, right, I can take a set of plans, walk down to the building department, get a permit, end of discussion, right? There really isn't much at all in the way of an entitlement process. On the other hand, if you're building a major development on a piece of empty land that's going to impact the neighbors, going to impact the environment, yeah, it's worth going through a fairly elaborate entitlement process to make sure those things.
There's a reason for it.
And if you're building 200 or 300 units, that's expected.
Sure.
And it's when you're distributing those costs over 200 or 300 units, it's not
as big of a deal.
It's not a big a number.
Yeah, sure.
So what's missing, I think, here is an entitlement. Just like the financing, the construction, the design, everything else, we're missing an entitlement process for the middle. We don't really have a process.
So they've done they streamlined this. That was
Yeah.
the point I was trying to make
Yeah.
out in Portland and Seattle and California.
Exactly.
Where if you walk in, just like you said,
Yep.
and you check these 2 dozen, 3 dozen boxes,
Yep.
what actually they've done is they've dedicated a staff member to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And that staff member walks you through this
Sure.
whole process. So if a homeowner comes in and wants to do this, they check these boxes, and then they forward you off to Richard, who's done this before. Hey,
Right.
Richard, and they help this homeowner get through this.
Yeah.
And this is how they vetted through this issue of just, you're allowed to do it and let somebody out on their
Right.
own. But it goes from months and months to a few days, and it goes
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
We got a ton of comments coming in, and a ton
sorry.
of comments coming in from people that I would say are like housing junkies, and a ton of comments coming in from people that are, laymen. Okay?
Yeah.
So I want to relay some of these to you. This is from a serial entrepreneur, and Andre Xavier, who just got property rezoned in Gordonsville to build a massive brewery, an event center. The old, I think it was American Legion or VFW space in Gordonsville. Okay? So he's gone through this process of going through rezoning. He's a serial entrepreneur. He also owns Seville Hop-On Tours. He lives in the neighborhood Cascadia. The Cascadia background, help me with this, is probably what? $500,000 up to $1 million from a price tag?
And in today's world,
Yeah.
Didn't start that way, but yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, so he says this, he lives in Cascadia. He says, I don't think ADUs are a good response for affordable housing. For example, here at Cascadia, we have an ADU unit as long as, we're allowed to have ADUs as long as they are attached to the main building, AKA your basement. I think the only reason why this was allowed was because the developer used it as a proffer to get the zoning approved. One of my neighbors is renting her basement to a single person, a white woman who is well employed and makes a lot of money. I don't think low-income families will find a place on ADUs in Cascadia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. He's 100%
I think
right.
valid criticism. I really don't think that any kind of infill strategy all by itself is a solution to the affordable housing situation.
So a dear friend of mine out in Portland, Robert Liberty, coined this term, and I've stole it. There's no one single bullet. There's a silver buckshot.
Exactly, yeah.
Buckshot.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can pull a couple of things from that. I love Xavier to death, and he's spot on. But if Albemarle County would have had an ordinance, which it does not, that allows that basement to be rented to a 60 or 50 or 80% AMI client, and they get a tax incentive, that'll happen.
That's what we need.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, that space gets filled with the people who really need it.
And from a public policy perspective, it's probably a pretty effective, cost-effective way
Oh my God.
of getting affordable housing built. Sure, when you're basically piggybacking on the construction of another property. So as opposed to go out and directly building affordable housing from a municipality, they can get.
And just the premise of the critique, which is an important critique, it's affordable to that lady. So
Yeah.
it's affordable to her.
Yeah.
So there's a benefit. I mean,
Well,
it may not be. So let's not do ADUs because it's not affordable to the lower, 50% of AMI. Okay, well maybe we need another solution. But is it worth not doing?
And that's the problem with the term affordable housing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you just opened up a whole can
yeah.
of worms
Yeah.
I chair the Regional Housing Partnership, as you know, and we're trying to tackle this term, and the five of us,
Define it differently.
with Liza in the room with
The
the
dog.
dog,
Yeah.
defines it different than
Yeah.
than all of us. So
Right.
that's a tough tackle of what that means.
It is, but it's fundamental to that lady. I mean, and I was thinking about this when I moved to Portland. I just needed a place. I had $1,000 in my pocket. I spent $800 of it for a suit for my first job. I only had, and Portland received me. Portland said, "Come on, we have a place for you," and it was wonderful. I love Portland. I didn't stay there. That's beside the point. But what I want to say is this community receptive to people?
So that's a real interesting point, Bob, because of
Well
the
said, Bob.
multiple visits I've had out in Portland and Seattle. It's the opposite. It's a YIMBY thing, right? Yes, in my backyard. The local folks want Bob in there. I don't understand why, but they
Stop. Leave that man alone.
That's
Leave
why
that man alone.
I kept going west until the city.
We've been
received
way
me,
too
so.
nice to each other during this show.
How about this from a real estate agent, realtor, okay? Sarah Hill Buczynski, okay? She has this comment. So if, and why don't we throw this to Richard first? So if one of city council's goals and the board of supervisors' goals is to address affordable housing, why are some of these rules not changing faster? It seems like this would help the issue quickly. Who is opposed to this? Why can't we see action?
I don't know that I can answer that question, but I don't think I'm saying anything new. These are all comments, ideas, things that we've been talking about for years. That there's a process needs to happen here to streamline some of this stuff. So.
And I'm not trying to whatever about myself, but I literally have hundreds of hours of conversations with elected officials and stuff. So my suggestion to Sarah, to anybody listening, what happens after a certain period of time, they get tired of hearing from Keith. They get tired of hearing from Bob, right? They get tired of hearing from Richard. So if you could engage just an email with the city or the county and let your thoughts known, it'll carry weight. It will. But at a certain point when I have conversations over and over and over, they're just like, oh, I don't want, they're tired of hearing from me. So if you can get involved, that's the best way to do it.
More comments coming in. This has been a fantastic roundtable here. Donald Mayer is giving you some props.
Donald Mayer from Boston?
Yeah, watching
No.
right now. He says, great job, Bob. A very compassionate project. I hope all works out for all of you. We appreciate you. Bob, you're also getting props from Andres Martinez, Galen Stengel. I'm messing up their names.
Galen
I'm sorry.
Galen Stengel. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Galen.
Gordon is giving you props. Is that family to you?
Gordon Pinio?
Yeah?
He's in Panama City, Panama.
Yeah, watching right now and just gave you some love. This is the
my
power
God.
of social media.
Did I
It's
not
good.
tell you
That's
about
incredible.
this? You didn't believe me.
How about, and help me with this name, Bob, Macarena,
Magarena Restrepo.
yep.
Gomez.
Balbonton?
Balbontin.
Yeah.
She's my stepsister.
Where is she watching?
She's in Miami.
Okay, so we now have, my heat map says 6 states and 3 countries watching you guys here on this roundtable.
is she even?
Roger has a comment. Roger, we love when you offer perspective on the show. Roger Voisinay, a 1-bedroom apartment built over a garage in Riverside Village only cost the home buyer building a new home $44,000 in additional capital, which was rolled into their mortgage.
Right.
When it's built at the same time as the primary unit, that's easily the most cost-effective way of doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We did talk to a mortgage person when we were working through the ADU, as a business, and we talked to actually several of them, and they love the idea of it because unlike when you borrow money to you're not going to walk away from your primary residence, so they thought of it as a very stable investment.
So that was the fourth problem with ADUs, which I failed to bring up, was the financing of it, and that has changed substantially over the last 3 to 5 years.
There's banks that will finance an ADU?
Yeah.
In town, in Charlottesville?
Yeah,
Well,
I don't want to mention names, but I know one for sure that'll do
Oh, we talked to several, and the idea of it, once they come to grips with the understanding of what it is, they love it from an investment standpoint.
it. But the key here is
Well, because of the supplemental revenue stream.
Because of the if I went to them and said I want $40,000 for a new car, well, I may wreck that car.
Sure, and the car depreciates 40% as soon as you
Exactly.
drive it off the lot, where
Exactly.
the ADU is going to add value to the property.
Exactly.
Right,
So if
the
they walk
property,
away
yeah.
from it, which they won't because it's very stable, you don't walk away from single-family
Which
houses.
banks are those?
Can I
That will
mention it?
finance it? Yeah.
Yeah, Virginia National Bank. We had top-level conversations.
Glenn?
Not Glenn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I know Fulton will too.
Yeah, I know.
Fulton will
well.
too.
So here's the trick to that, gentlemen and folks. If Mr. and Mrs. Smith are going to buy that product at Riverside, right, I have to be able, my debt to income has to be able to cover
To work it.
the
Yeah.
whole thing. I can't save that 44 or that $400 or whatever that's going to be is going to offset it, because from a bank regulator's perspective, they've got to make sure I can afford
Yeah.
to
Right.
pay for the whole thing, that if there wasn't a tenant in there. So we just don't want to mislead folks on that end
Yeah,
of it.
actually, I was just reminded that Bob and I, years ago, looked into, do you remember this, doing an ADU project in a single-family lot? And the idea was just that idea about how do you know, this suddenly ups the price tag for the homeowner, but how do we, as developers, take that value back from the ADU so we don't have to up the price of the main house? And we looked into, we were basically stymied by financing.
Well, that's why
considerations. There wasn't a mechanism really that would allow us to effectively keep possession of that ADU as the developer to take the income stream from that and reduce the price of the main house.
That's
So
why the land trust model
Exactly.
works so
Yeah.
well, and that
Exactly.
model is working so well, is that it takes that component out of it, so then the land trust is the one that actually does all the funding and
Yeah.
building and construction on that
Yep.
end of it.
Dan, Mustache Dan Pettit.
Mustache
Dan Pettit says the Belvedere neighborhood
Yep.
allows apartments over garages. That's from Mustache Dan Pettit, a fantastic realtor. So this is an interesting comment that's been sent over via Instagram.
Okay.
This is from Grace, who watches the program often. To Jerry's point, won't homeowners choose to rent their ADUs to tenants that look like them?
It's funny, in Portland, Seattle, that didn't happen, but it's a great question, but it's
It's a great question. I mean,
I had an ADU in my house when we first built my house. It was
Yeah.
an attached ADU in the basement, and it's as from an income stream, it was incredible because I got a rent check the same day that I had to pay a mortgage check. The mortgage check.
That's great.
Yeah, so I had it for 13 years. We stopped doing it because we got, anyway, long story. But I had 13 people, different types of people. Did they all look like me? No. There were females, there were males, there was different ethnicities. We learned a lot through that process. We've made some great friends to this day through this process. So they were a cut of people I knew. Again, I would say that I had a great relationship. They had a place that they loved living in. Does it solve every problem? No. Does that mean that it's not valuable, or that it can't be expanded to different types of situations?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of the buckshots, silver buckshots. It's not the panacea.
Yeah.
yeah.
Susan Steinmart, I researched Albemarle County legislative permits review. Historically, these took an average of 2+ years. This does not include the site plan, which is another process, likely another 6 months. She also says, how many people can pick out an ADU in a neighborhood? They are less intrusive than people realize. I completely agree with that. She says, I love it from Richard, an entitlement process for the middle density. She says, as a grad student in St. Louis, somewhere in California, I'm sorry I can't say this, Susan. I need to get more cosmopolitan in my travels. I apologize, Susan. I just worked too hard. I benefited from the affordability of ADUs in this community. I had the benefit of living in two different ADUs while in my 3 years in California. It was a great experience. And then she highlights Better Living Construction as a great partner in providing the framing for garage-type ADUs. The frame structure can come together in one day.
So that's panelization. That's what.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that, and ultimately, when this team that we're on, that's where we landed, which was the best way to to build auxiliary dwelling units, particularly on an existing home, was a panelization system.
Yeah.
On that.
I got a couple statistics for you.
Please.
When we were doing our research, this is a couple years old, but there were 9,918 single-family unit detached homes in Charlottesville. So we thought, okay, here's our market. If we do 10%, or let's say 1% per year, that's 100 ADUs. And I think that since the time Maurice passed it, which is almost 20 years ago, the numbers are really anemic,
Very
in
anemic.
in regards to how many ADUs.
Yep.
But just think about that, 9,000 people. Let's say we did one per every house. That's 10,000 ADUs, at least 20,000 people. That's 50% more, people than we have now. So there's a huge opportunity there. And then we looked at the average lot size. And the average lot size, there's all sorts of different across the different areas in Charlottesville, but the average was about 12,000 square feet. 12,000 square feet of land. Think about how that's a big piece of land relative to a small building.
Do you have an average footprint on that?
That's on another page.
Got it.
But one thing I do want to make sure that we understand, because it might be time, ADUs are the
We can go as long as you want.
Oh,
if you guys
okay.
have something to do, though, we can stop too. We
Well,
got a ton more comments coming in.
Okay, the only thing I want to say is the ADU is the smaller part of this missing middle. It's the
That's
tiny
exactly
part.
right.
Yeah.
That's
So
Piece,
look
yeah, sure.
around you, man. Look at all these sites. Everything is latent, and the zoning is actually. And what I want to say about the ADU ordinance is that it was actually pretty good as it is. Like somebody.
It just needs to be tweaked.
It
Just
needs
a
to
little.
Tweaked. Yeah, no, it's pretty
Tweaked.
good.
It needs to be tweaked, but even without the tweaks, it's still actionable. And so it is a special use permit, but that's more of a, they're not going to deny you.
But
But it's just
but-
one more hoop to jump through.
but-
But
look at-
that's
look at-
exactly right. So
yeah.
that hoop is an expensive hoop.
It's an expensive hoop.
That's an expensive hoop.
Yeah.
And as you know, because we deal with this on a regular basis, Jerry walks in, or Mr. and Mrs. property owner from Belmont, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
That's an overwhelming thing to do on your own.
Yeah.
You need to reach out to the experts like you guys to help them go through that,
Right.
which is an expense.
Right.
Right. And what they have done out west is they've made it by right. So then it's a staff review process. If you check all these boxes, then you're done. Then you move forward on it.
Yeah.
An SUP. So let's talk terminology. So those
Special
who don't,
use permit.
it's a special use permit.
Yeah.
So to be clear, that is no different than a rezoning. Right? It goes through the same process of that. It goes
Yeah.
through the staff process. It goes through the planning.
It's no easy task.
It's a very open political process,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, in the city of Charlottesville, 3 board of city councilors have to say yes.
Right.
That is a long, expensive process.
Even more frustrating, with 6 members on the Board of Supervisors, you need 4 to say yes. And if it's 3, the project gets voted down,
Right.
which is a topic for a different show.
Yeah.
Betsy Rodinger?
Rutger, my
Yeah.
wife.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
She's giving you a lot of props
All
right
right,
now.
propped it up. Okay.
Get
so
back
is
to work.
Nancy. So is Nancy.
Nancy Rutger. All
Yeah.
right. How did she get on there?
And Bill Mousy from Landscape Architects,
Yep.
watching the program right now. Here's an interesting comment. This is coming from Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
This is from Chris Coppinger. I've watched this entire show. You guys have talked ADUs, and then you have not highlighted the need to improve transportation in the community if you're going to enhance density. They have to be one and the same.
Agreed, completely.
Agreed.
Big part of the reason for doing infill development of any kind, ADUs, missing middle, is to take advantage of existing transportation networks. Very modest contribution there at the High Street project, for example. I was able to do that with just 1 parking space per unit because we're in walking distance to downtown Charlottesville.
Good for you.
Yeah, which is tough to do. You need a good transportation network to do infill development. But especially ADUs, for example, you're taking advantage of the existing transportation networks, and you're increasing density
Right.
without really changing the character of the neighborhood.
And you're adding seats, you're adding people to
Adding
that.
people, which is
Which is great for the
supporting pedestrian-oriented businesses and downtown merchants, for example.
So
yeah.
a little bit of local transportation news. Learned that last night's Planning District Commission, CAT is going to keep the fare free for another 3 years.
Yeah.
Mm.
If we're not careful,
Right.
CAT very well could go bankrupt or be a thing of the past. It's been operating in the red for a substantial amount of time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm going to throw this out there. My concern is this pandemic is diminishing consumer confidence for public transportation. Because how many people want to get get inside a tin can with people they don't know, and the same breathing systems of those people?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, since there's more shots in arms, this will hopefully get to a better place by the end of the year. But it was interesting. I was reading earlier this morning and prepping for this, and we've talked about this before, and these two gentlemen know this. We used to have a pretty robust light rail system in Charlottesville. And that...
You remember that?
That was long before my time. But yeah,
I almost was going
I'm not that old, Jerry.
Bob?
No.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I've been here since 2000.
Well, because it
too.
ended in like early 1900s.
You're calling it a light rail system, but you're talking, it was a streetcar system.
Well,
Yeah.
that's light rail,
Yeah,
right?
it is light rail.
It was a streetcar. It started off with a mule pull thing, but it was a robust, and if you Google it, there's some really interesting articles written about it and some pictures on it. But they had a very robust light rail or streetcar system, and went from mule pull to electrification, and then the advent of the car in the early 1900s just dropped the whole thing.
I know everyone's got to, we're mindful of your most precious commodity, your time here. We're 10 minutes over here. We have people like Christopher that are saying more, keep the discussion going. And unfortunately, I don't think we can right now because I think you guys
I got one thing I got to say.
Please.
Richard and I were part of the founding members of CADRA, which is Charlottesville Area Developers Roundtable. And basically, we all got together, right? So what you're talking about when you say, homeowner goes to the city and tries to get something entitled, that's what we do every day as a collective. And we were fighting the lone wolf fight. You'd get up and then everybody would scream at you, and you'd have all these entitlement issues, and it would take a year. And we said collectively, what are we doing? And maybe we should talk collectively about what the future looks like and demystify. One of the first things that came out of that discussion is, what do people think of developers, or we're agents of change as architects, as developers. And are we bad people? Are we doing bad things? Are we trying to take away the soul and heart? And then you ask people, what do you like about Charlottesville? 90% of what they like in the built form is done by a developer. So developers can't be that bad, right? Because look at what's happening. So collectively, there's this idea. I'll go back to the main thesis here is, who are we? What are we doing? All these tools are tools that either implicitly react to the fundamental feeling of who we think we are. So if you don't want development, then there's roadblocks. If you don't want, just think about it, not as a consequence of the problem, but as a consequence of an ideology of who you think you are. This is reflective of that idea. So any issues that come up, well, let's go back. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be inclusive? Do you want to be open? Do you want to be but we don't like big development. Okay, don't do big development. Do small development. What does that mean? Go take a look at Richards. Think about an ADU. Think about the latent capacity that this city has to be more accepted. And you don't have to just roll over. You can say what this community wants to be. It would be an incredible piece to say to the world, hey, we decided what we wanted to be.
That's an interesting point, Bob, because 20 years ago, again back to Maurice Cox's days, the city did a corridor study. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was really what is the capacity of the city to do infill development. And it was a great document because it showed, in fact, the city has got a huge capacity for doing missing middle development. There's quite a bit of potential to grow doing that way, but very little of that has actually gotten.
So I want to give a shout out to Greg Powell. So Greg
Yep.
Powell's another architect. Greg sits on the Regional Housing Partnership, which is Cadre. He's a representative from Cadre. So
Greg's great.
for the last 3 years, we've been working to solve exactly what Bob is mentioning. And what we have there is what I refer to as the 4 pillars to a healthy housing system. We have the public sector, which is the local governments. We have the private sectors, which is Cadre and you guys. We have the nonprofits, which is the Land Trust and Habitat and PH and all these folks. And then we have what's the most important is the people we actually serve. The people who actually live in these homes. And then we've got the 20-ton elephant in the room, which is UVA at the table. And we're literally, and it's a public thing, it's a public body. Anybody can attend meetings virtually, or hopefully we'll go to in person. But literally, that's what we're trying to tackle. What do we want to be? And in order to do that, you have to have all these 4 pillars at the table. And, you know, knock on fake IKEA, we're kind of getting there. So thank you for sharing that.
John Gardner says this, and we'll close. Sounds like we need an architect back on council. Richard, Bob, are you ready? And then one last comment, Rosalind
Keys.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Roz Kesey, hey Roz.
Yeah.
She says, great discussion. Good to see Bob and Richard on this show.
Great.
I think when we close, we may have to do this again.
Well-
because there's like a ton of comments that we haven't been able to get to, and you guys have taken a topic that's quite complicated, but made it approachable to what appears to be 9 states and 4 different countries today.
Wow.
Super.
So we are going to do that. We've got this programmed out over the next 30 to 60 days. So we're going to be bringing others to tackle this topic, elected officials, activists, folks to kind of get this conversation, get these 4 pillars of a healthy housing system in this roundtable format. So hopefully we can get this discussion going in the right direction.
Guys, this is Real Talk. It goes from 10:15 to on the I Love Seagull
lunch.
Network. It's presented by Yes Team Realtors and Yes Realty Partners. The whole concept of what we're trying to do is to get information to you in the most approachable way possible. And from my standpoint, I think it's on this device, on the platforms that we live upon, which is social media. Thank you kindly for joining us on a glorious day to be alive, a Friday, April 2nd here in 2021. You guys have a good one. Take care. Gentlemen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was a lot of
That was
fun.
fun. Yeah, that was great. Thank you.